Alrighty, APHUG, we are ready to move it on. We finished up all of our business about primate cities and rank size rule and all that kind of business. One of the things that came up with primate cities, and I know that even from some of what I had in the notes, it's kind of like, why isn't New York considered one? That sort of a thing. And one of the things to kind of keep in mind before we move on here in the central place theory is that a lot of times primate cities, it also means that it's a city in a country that just kind of like just dwarfs all the other cities in that country. And, when we look at the United States, yes, New York City is by far the largest, but it doesn't absolutely completely just stand alone. I mean, very quickly you can go to Los Angeles, you can go to Chicago, you've got other places that you can start going down the line with. And that's why in within a lot of definitions, we don't really find New York City being a really good fit with that concept of primate cities. When you go to countries like Mexico, I mean, there's no other city that even comes remotely close to the massive size of Mexico City. Okay, you go to England, and London just stands out, starkly alone in terms of its size. I mean, do those countries have other big cities? They do, but they're just kind of lost in the shadows, that kind of a thing. Okay, all right. Anyhow, I remember that come up in class, and I probably didn't have the kind of answer that I should have had for you at the time because, well, again, as I've told you guys, I don't pretend to be an expert on all of it. All right, so we'll move on to central place theory, which was a concept that was written about by Herr Walter Christaller, German geographer, back in 1933. He's kind of got a bit of a sketchy past. In 1933, I don't expect you to know, but it was the year that Hitler took power in Germany and started Germany on that kind of short road to World War II. There's always been kind of rumors that swirl around. Was Christaller a Nazi? He did end up working for the German government in World War II. So, I mean, if he wasn't a Nazi, he was working for him. But we'll leave that all to the side and focus here on his central place theory, which really was the first time we had a geographer that was writing about the concept of cities and looking at them more as systems rather than these separate kind of entities that pop up here and there and there and that kind of thing. That there's some patterns that you can predict and all that sort of thing. A little bit kind of like that video that we were watching that just said that there's a lot of elements about urbanization and cities that you can just it's kind of eerie, but it's extremely predictable. And some of that starts going on here with Christaller. Okay, so B is a kind of another way of looking at it. I can kind of see some kind of parallels to this and von Thunen's. We'll see some that are even closer later on. But if you look at the image over here on the right side, so you have all these hexagons, and that's kind of what Christaller is. That's kind of how he organizes this to kind of get his theory out there. He says that these are hexagons that kind of fit together. They're not going to be perfect circles because then you'd have little weird spaces in between. So the hexagon's a way of pinning this all together. And that he talks about that you're going to have one fairly large city that in this case represented by the red. But then you're going to have all of these little towns or villages, however you want to describe them, smaller towns and villages that are scattered around. Well, actually, he kind of delineates on this example that we have towns, then all the little ones are villages. Okay, so you get that hierarchy going on there from city to town. You've got market towns that also have their own ability to sell things and all that sort of thing. So you have all these operating but he's saying that that this is a system and they all are basically interrelated with each other. And so let's go a little bit further into this. So he defines that central place. Whether and on our hexagons, it's that little circle that's at the center of each of the hexagons. Okay, and so the central place is just as you have it defined there, right? Whether we're talking about in the towns, whether we're talking about in the city, the market towns. This is where people go to access goods and services. Okay, when we say goods, we basically mean things like, going for a grocery store, going to the hardware store, going to the furniture store, whatever it is that you're in need of. And then services, yeah, you need to have your car worked on, you'd get a haircut, you need, those kinds of things. Okay, and so he's saying that where regardless of the size, each of those little hexagons, has that, and that's what he calls the central place that is central to his theory. All right. And then he says that what we have here is, and this is where we get into our little blue squares and our hexagons here, is around the central place. Okay. And so again, if we're thinking about the big city here, and you can kind of go macro and micro on this. And if I go macro, if I go a little bit bigger, then there we go. We've got that city that is, sorry about that, spinning around there. That's in the center. And then all of these market areas that we have, and we could be talking about the market towns, but you could also be lumping in the towns and the villages. This city is going to have certain goods and services that the other areas are not going to have. Okay. And so what we call all of this together around the central place is just the market area. And that is when you have specific goods and services that you're not necessarily going to be able to find in the towns, the market towns, and the villages. And boom, you've got it there in the city. Okay, like it says there, the market area will provide the population to keep those goods and services, those businesses running. Right. So that's kind of the relationship that goes on there. Okay. Threshold and range, a couple of the other terms that were on our vocab list. So threshold is quite simply is the word that we use to describe, how many people do you need to keep this business open? And this is something that a lot of people who even open businesses today, they try to do some, basically some economic studies of the area that they want to open up in, or at least if they're smart, they are. Because you need to know before you start investing money, and getting a business off the ground is expensive. I don't care if it's just a little shop in a strip mall or a big store. All of it is expensive, and so studying threshold. Okay, for me to be able to turn a profit running this business, how many people need to be coming in and out of my door every day, and to figure to help you to determine that. How much population lives within, a 5-mile radius of my business, within a 10-mile radius of my business? Establishing that threshold so that you have a good, accurate idea of, how many people you're going to need, what kind of business level are you going to need to maintain to stay in business, right? So that all gets into what threshold is all about. And then we have examples, breaking that down a little bit further. We have examples of threshold. So what we call low threshold kind of businesses would be, well, I got like the gas station listed there. But you could also be looking at things like, an AM, PM, or, I think even in Mr. Sin's video, I think he talks about Subway, things like that. It's businesses that operate on a kind of a lower level. They're not going to need as many people, okay, as high threshold types of entities. They are able to run on kind of a smaller margin, okay, is the bottom line for you to be thinking about, trying to remember on this. Alrighty. Just you don't need as many people is what it gets down to. Low threshold, not as many people, right? High threshold means, yes, you need a lot of people, all right? If you do not have a lot of people living in the, in the range, the area of whatever this business may be, or yeah, as you can see, schools there, institution may be, you're not going to be able to keep it running, all right? You have to have a higher population to support this. So when you're talking about hospitals, okay, malls are kind of on their way out, but it's probably for a few more years we'll talk about those as an example. But online shopping has kind of made those slowly starting to turn those into a thing of the past. Even schools are all considered high threshold, businesses, institutions, entities, whichever kind of word we want to use there. Because even schools end up being shut down when there's not enough population, to fill the rooms. It costs a lot of money to maintain a school, from our teacher wages to maintenance, the books, everything. It adds up. And if you don't have enough kids, then it's not going to work. And the same goes with hospitals. You can't just have doctors and nurses, highly paid professionals, just kind of sitting around cooling their heels because they're out in the middle of nowhere, and they only see cases coming in maybe 2-3 times a day. So high threshold, they need a lot of people. Okay, so that kind of gets you into both the kind of subsets of threshold, right? Range gets into distance, and this, I think the definition is pretty much what it comes down to, and and really, it's almost like what's the distance people are willing almost to travel for specific goods and services. Because there's some things that those once in a lifetime trips. A lot of times, if you are traveling, overseas for a vacation to go to some place you've never been before, those kinds of things, that's one way of looking at it. And then, you're going to look at it different ways. Matter of fact, here, what am I talking about here? So when we talk about specialty goods and services, Disneyland could be kind of lumped in with that. Specialty goods and services could be kind of like where I'm at. I've got kind of a weird obsession with fancy little fountain pens and stuff. There aren't any shops very close nearby to me. I do, if I want to actually go physically to a pen store. Yeah, they actually still exist. But I got to drive some distance to find one. There's not one in my neighborhood. There's not one even in the neighborhoods anywhere near around me. There might be one in Portland, and it's way over on the far other side of town from where I'm at. And if it wasn't for that one, I would probably be looking down to like San Francisco or something. Okay. So, specialty goods for me, if I don't want to order online and I actually want to go to the physical site of a place like that. But again, vacation sites, you want to go, I don't know, you want to go to Liverpool, see where the Beatles grew up, I did that one. And, it required me to, take an 8-hour flight to get over there, that kind of stuff. Okay. And then, for short distances, that's, what we reserve for, the weekly grocery shopping, or, hey, we're out of toilet paper, that kind of stuff. And that's kind of the general rule that you can assume most of the time, is that people in general, if there's something that cannot be obtained locally, whether it's cultural, whether it's an actual, merchandise, whether it is that, that vacation of a lifetime, then we'll go long distance. But for most of the day to day, fill up the tank, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you're going to make it as convenient as, proximity wise, as close as you can possibly make it. Okay. And it's just the difference between basic needs and specialty goods. All right. There you go. There is that. Shift it on over. Let's talk a little bit about mega cities. Okay. Adding to the, we had our MSAs that we talked about earlier in the unit. All of our fun stuff with our metropolitan areas, our micropolitan areas, all of that, or statistical areas, I should say. Now we get to add another layer to that, and that's going to be part of the challenge with this unit. Is we're going to just kind of have a lot of different ways of looking at some of the same things. In this case, urbanization, cities. All right. So mega city, you got your definition of what a mega city is. Okay, 10 million and over. All right. So not quite as big as our metropolitan statistical area. And typically when we think of mega cities, you got that tail part of the definition there, that it's going to be a city that's recognized as having some kind of influence. Okay. And it could be, as we talked about before, that could be like New York City, that is still seen as like, kind of like economic powerhouse kind of location of the world, but also has some cultural influence. Remember back in Unit 2, 3, we, talked about, the origins of hip hop, of rap, coming out of the Bronx, that kind of a thing, right? And then, political influence a lot of times coming out of some of those big capital cities, right, that have a population of over 10 million, all of that kind of business. Alrighty, and cultural influence also. You've got, again, you got the models over there, kind of walking on the runway. Could be Milan, could be Paris, some of those other fashion capitals of the world. All right. Okay. Let's see. Zipping on up to the 21st century here. So, periphery and semi-periphery countries. Hold on here. Sorry about that. Where were we? Oh, periphery and semi-periphery. All right. So this is a name that we give to countries a lot of times that we refer to in classes like less developed, okay, or developing countries. I guess the less developed would be periphery, and the semi-periphery would be developing. Okay, and so if you go back to what we've covered in some of our prior units, Unit 2, things like that, learning that in a lot of those less developed countries, we're seeing more and more of a drive in urbanization, more people who are leaving the rural areas and moving to the cities, particularly men, to gain employment there. And so we find that, excuse me, some of the parts of the world who have the most rapidly growing cities going on, and in a lot of cases, I mean, we're talking large cities, in some cases going up to mega cities. These are happening in these parts of the world, okay, which is something very, very new here in the late 20th century and going in the 21st century. Going back traditionally when a lot of those parts of the world were under European control, when they had been colonized. You didn't see that kind of growth because everything was being controlled, usually by outside forces. So that's one aspect to kind of keep in mind with all of this. All right, and then while they are seeing this rapid growth in megacities, still, because they are in that developing or less developed category, we do see a tendency for a lot of these megacities to have some pretty significant struggles with with decent housing, good road systems, schools, hospitals, even just basic sewage, clean water, that kind of thing. A lot of this, again, going back to economics and the fact that a lot of these countries are economically disadvantaged, although not as much as they have been in the past. Right? There's some pictures that should have been with number 2. Yes, that will show you some of the struggles they have going on in there. Whether it's kind of more like these slum type living conditions or this kind of sanitation, which really isn't sanitation. World cities. All right, moving along here. Again, we're just kind of doing the all the odds and ends of different variations and ways we can describe cities. And this kind of goes back to the influential, okay, kind of concept. It's basically it's a subset of megacities. It's a type of megacity, okay, and so you kind of think of it kind of nested in that way. But again, this is where we see, as we've talked about before, okay, just the major influence, whether we're talking about fashion or media, which has been a big growing one here, but cities like New York and Tokyo and Paris, which we keep, just there they are again. All right. Like I said, media has been a big growing area when it comes to these world cities. Probably the biggest growing in about the last, 40, 50 years. We've also seen a big growth in some of these having influence that has more to do with internet technology, IT, things like that, computer technology, that sort of thing. And then you also have the example there of, financial centers, which, like we talk about, New York, Tokyo is considered a financial center in Asia. Corporate headquarters, I mean, we see that in in a lot of different parts of the world. We're learning about all of those, the way that transnationals and all that kind of thing. So there you go, some examples of what those world cities can look like. And then the idea of oversized influence, and that kind of gets back in some examples where we might have a city that can double up as a primate city and a world city, because that oversized influence could be because of its size, and it's oversized. But some examples of some places there, um, that kind of also are considered world cities because the kind of influence they have, financial influence, like in the case of Dubai. Even Shanghai is pretty much is an incredibly wealthy city, very very vast and very modern city. So these ones, Singapore and trade, things like that. Okay, that is also a way that we can be thinking about world cities. All right, megalopolis. Um, and so you had that word megalopolis and conurbation both in the vocab list from last week. And here's where we see how they work. Okay, when we have a number of cities that form what we call a conurbation, it's, again, I told you guys, kind of, it's basically, we're going to use it in terms of a synonym for megalopolis. And so, we have one of our more famous ones there, the Boswash, as some people call it, the Boswash megalopolis, that connects the city Boston all the way down to Washington, D.C. Some other examples in California, you have the what they call the San megalopolis, and that is from San Diego to San Francisco, or the other way around if you want. The poorly named, connecting a part of the Midwest from Chicago to Pittsburgh, and they just call it the Chai Pits. Sounds kind of, yeah. Well, hey, I don't make the names up. There's ones in other parts of the world. There's a megalopolis kind of along the Greater Nile. They call it the Greater Nile megalopolis in Egypt. Nairobi in Kenya, a megalopolis that kind of strings along in there. Tokyo to Yokohama is a megalopolis. Hong Kong is seen as a megalopolis. So there's other examples of it besides just what we have here. Hey, and that gives you the nighttime view of the Boswash, and you can just see that huge concentration of life basically as it's all lit up. No better way usually to get a good read on where population is by looking at some of that nighttime satellite photography. Always very enlightening, kind of showing you your country or the world. All right, we shift gears, and part 2 is where we're going to head it now. And we're going to focus primarily on what you see right there. A lot of models coming at you. Okay, we're going to learn about a lot of different kind of city models, and a lot of these are going to be connected to different parts of the world. There's going to be a number of them that you're going to want to try your best to remember. We'll do some work in class to try to help you remember all of these different models. Here we go. First, I'll give you kind of the basics. Okay. What we want to know about these urban models is they're not just kind of pie in the sky. Some geographer at a university up in some office kind of just dreaming this stuff up. These land use models are based on reality, and they come from the study of real cities and the way that they're organized, the way that they interact, all of that kind of stuff. Okay. One of the reasons why we focus a lot of attention here in this unit on these land use models is it does give us a sense of order about the world and about the way that we arrange our urban areas. And so it gives us that ability, like it says there, to classify, to categorize, kind of like bring that order to the world. All right, can't all be chaos. And then when we talk about spatially segregated land, in other words, why is it when you look at a city that you're going to see one part of the city where there's like lots of high rises, another part of the city where maybe you see lots of restaurants, that's what I can mean there is kind of the divisions that you're going to see within a city. I'm not talking, a lot of time I think when we hear the word segregated, we immediately go to thinking about, people being separated from each other because of ethnicity or race or religion. This is actually the way that we see cities kind of segregate themselves. Why do neighborhoods end up in some parts, that kind of thing, and to try to see if there's, are there patterns, is there predictability about this, what can we see when we kind of look a little bit closer at that. Okay. And then the last one there, our focus on urban land use models. Really kind of gets into, one of our big themes for APHUG. Why are things where they're at? Kind of getting to the heart of locations of things, and explaining why, when we talk of the ways that urban landscapes are created, what is there something there again that we can see that's kind of predictable, that kind of thing. All right. All right. So urban zones, or what we can call functional zonation. All right, functional zonation. This is getting the idea that when we look at an urban area, when we look at a city, we're going to see that parts of it have, like it says there, very, very specific purposes. This could be, some of it's going to be commercial, and so it's a lot of businesses. Some of it can be residential, just where people live, apartments, houses, townhouses, condos, all that kind of thing. Industrial, and so you could have a part of a city where there's, and most cities try to do this, where it's kind of segregated away from other parts of the city, where there's, whether it's manufacturing that's going on, whether it's warehouses, whether it's if it's near a port, and all the area where semis that are coming in and out and loading up with containers that are coming off of cargo ships from overseas. All that kind of thing can be in there in that industrial. And then you could also have government, part of a city where you're going to find, maybe town hall or a county city building, or, those kinds of services. Okay. And so when we talk about that functional zonation, it's kind of a reference to this idea that, all these different areas have these very, very kind of specific, all these areas, I should say, you can almost call it, all these zones have this specific purpose. Okay. And when we see these zones, spread across a little chunk of territory, some landscape, that is what you and I usually refer to as a city. Okay. Now you can start thinking about it. That's not a city. That's an urban zone spread across a landscape. Which is why you'll hear me, and soon enough you too will be joining me, where when we think of urbanization, and we're thinking about cities and suburbs, and it all kind of begins to create its own little stew. All right, let's see what we can do here. I think we're coming down to where I'm going to probably this might be pretty darn close to our last slide. Okay, when we look at urban models, kind of going down on the same theme before we start jumping into them all. Another kind of a motive or a reason for our study of this is going to be number 2 there. Okay. All right. So we're going to introduce, first of all, before we start going into our examples of specific models, we also need to introduce you to the central concept of the central business district. All right. A lot of times you're going to see this abbreviated down to CBD, but this is a little bit different than what they're selling at all those stores spread all over Vancouver and down into Portland and everywhere else in the world. No, this has nothing to do with CBD oil, CBD this, CBD that. It's all about the central business district. Okay, so sorry if you thought maybe that would take us down the road to, we're going to be learning about drugs. No, we're not learning about drugs. We're learning about central business district. All right. And the CBD is kind of like you see the picture over there, is kind of what a lot of people consider to be the heart of a city. A lot of time it's going to be the most highly commercialized part of a city. It's where you are going to have a lot of those, if you have a city that has high rises, that's where they're going to be. If you're going to have a lot of, some fancy, expensive department stores, specialty stores, that's where they're going to be. If you're going to have office spaces where there are people working, representing different businesses, that kind of thing, that's where they're going to be. That is what the central business district is. It's where most of the business going on in that city is happening. Okay, here's where we can kind of memories of von Thunen all start coming back here. All right, and we're just getting started. The bid rent curve. We're already somewhat familiar with it, all right? And where you see a city with a very healthy CBD, that is going to be the most expensive real estate that you're gonna see. Okay, and I think I mentioned in class before, Manhattan and New York City. the most expensive real estate in the United States, and that is because of the bid rent curve. Okay, and just like we talked about Von Thunen and that marketplace, that now we're just replacing it with the CBD, and that is at the center of it. And then the further on out you go beyond there, you see land values slowly decrease. Okay, until you're out there in the suburbs, out there in the residential areas, and there's probably no comparison between the price, per square foot of land compared to what you've got right there dead center in the CBD. Ready? Okay, we're going to take care of one of these here. Like I said, I want to get down to the bottom of this slide, so we're going to go a little beyond. I usually try to cut off around 30. Oh, well. All right, so city models that we see here in North America. I'm going to start you off with, the concentric zone model, okay? And this is the one that, you can see from the picture down below here. This is going to be the one that is going to follow very, very closely in line with what we learned about with Von Thunen. So this will be should be an easy one for you to think. Okay, when you think about concentric, it's that idea of, the concentric rings. It's kind of like, I don't know, think about, if you throw a rock into a still little pond, and the little rings emanate from, that's kind of what you're thinking of here, okay? And so, you got your CBD there in the middle, and then you can assign all of these different zones, whether we're talking about the idea of, beyond there, that you're going to have an industrial zone, a commercial zone, a residential zone, and those would all be defined as you head on out from there, okay? Oftentimes referred to as the Burgess model. Okay, I think it's E.W. Burgess you see pictured over there. He was a sociologist who, that's a picture of him as a much older man, but back when he was a younger guy in the 1920s, he's the one who established this concept of the concentric zone model, and said that there, and basically writing about the fact that there were certain kind of predictable elements of this, and again, the ability to see patterns, to see this repeat. That sort of thing. Okay, and like I said, bid rent curve definitely with the concentric zone model is in full play, and so the closer you get to that central business district there in the center, the higher the real estate value, the higher the value of the land is going to be, aka rent. What you're going to be paying for that land, rent, or if you're buying to own it. Still, same thing is the closer you are to the center of it, the more expensive it is. All right, and then the inverse. Okay, the further away you get from it, the more it goes tumbling down just a bit there. All right, that'll be where we stop, and that's not too far over the line there. We've got many other models that we will look at. Some of them, some other North American models, but then we are going to head out to the rest of the world. And we're going to look at models in Latin America and in Africa and in the Middle East. And your head's going to be so swimming with models, you're not going to know which end is up. Which, when we get there, we'll know that, hey, we've accomplished our goal once again of leaving all of us confused because it's APHUG. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you for now. Hopefully you got enough to get some good stuff in the left column there. Any questions on any of this, save them for me when we're back in class together. See ya.